And thank you for joining me in this final webinar of the Landscape Photography Far and Wide series. If you weren't able to attend all three of the prior webinars, I hope you get the chance to watch those recordings to review everything we talked about the last few weeks. But this week is all about the images that you guys captured and submitted for review. I will try to get to as many as I can. There were so many images that you guys submitted, and they're all so fantastic. But we do only have 50 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to get to everyone, but I'm going to get to as many images as I can and talk about some of the highlights that I see or suggestions I might have. And again, just to get as many as I can tonight. Before we get into the photos real quick, I just wanted to say a few quick words about critique in general. And that's just that art is so subjective. And I think it's important to remember that whether we are the one giving or receiving critique, it can be really helpful to get an outside perspective and eye on our art, but we also always have the option to say thanks or no thanks in those suggestions for change. Sometimes we may find suggestions help to improve what our vision of our work and our images, but other times someone may give us suggestions that we don't really feel fits our vision, and it's okay to take it all in and then decide, what you think works in your work. Another thing I think is important to remember is that we can love images even when we see something we might change in them. And I always try to review my own work when I cull and edit and to learn for next time. But I always remind myself that just because I see something I might improve or do differently next time doesn't mean that I can't love the image in front of me in that moment as well. So let's go ahead and start with the images that you guys submitted, and I will try to get through as many as I can. I brought them into Lightroom just so we can see them. You guys can see the histogram, and sometimes I might make little cropping suggestions, and that way I can do a quick demonstration here on my screen. So I just pulled them in and went with them in the order that they came in. So this first one is a beautiful black and white waterfall long exposure scene. This is a really striking landscape and excellent option for a black and white conversion. When I think of black and white landscapes, I look for a mixture of textures and tones, as well as leading lines and shapes. And this image has a lot of those elements. The tones in this image span the histogram over here from dark to light, which is something I always look for in black and white images. And another thing that I love in black and white is a mixture of textures. So this has a great mix of the softness of the water that comes from the shutter speed of 1/30. And it's a nice contrast against the texture of these rocks in the foreground, as well as surrounding the waterfall. I love the choice here of putting the waterfall and the horizon higher in the scene so that we have this nice line of the water creating a long scan path into the image and creating a lot of nice depth. The choice of this shutter speed of 1/30 works really nice to smooth out the water a little bit and also maintain a little bit of texture as well. Just a couple little suggestions I noticed. I think this little area of the water at the base of the waterfall is a little bright, losing a little bit of detail. So I might suggest if the straight out of camera shot was not quite as bright, to just watch that detail in the water. I love the texture of the rocks. I might personally pull back a little bit on the clarity. I know that clarity tends to be a bit of a subjective slider. So that's just my own personal preference. I might pull back just a little bit. And the only other thing that I might do here is crop in just a little bit from this lower corner. I notice as I come in that this rock is just sticking up just a little bit. And I feel like if we crop just above it, there would be a little bit smoother flow into the image. So as I come here, I'm going to crop just a little bit from each side to come up so that I keep some of the balance that we have on the right and the left, and just come up there. And I just think that because it's not sticking up as much here in the corner, that my eye just flows right into the image a little bit more smoothly. This is a really beautiful black and white, and thanks for giving us a great start to our review session with this one. Flip over to this one. This beautiful autumn image draws me in right away with the beautiful colors. Another thing that really draws me right into this image is these leading diagonal lines that are reflections of the light and shadow play over here on the left side of the mountain. I love the way these lines are parallel to the line of the foliage here. It really leads my eye over to this valley and leads me to explore the peaks of the mountains. This image has beautiful warm and cool contrast between the warm foliage and the blue sky, which I really love. I wouldn't suggest a lot of change here. It has really nice contrast. I would probably lighten up the shadow to bring a little bit more detail into this darkness of the mountain, and as well the reflection that leads into the frame. If you see, just lightening those shadows just brings more texture and detail into these areas. And it also helps to bring out what looks like a little trail above here in the mountains. I would probably crop in just a little bit to remove this tiny little bit of foliage, or if you worked in Photoshop, you could even just quickly clone this little bit out. It's just because it's right here on the bottom. And because this image has such beautiful foreground, the sky is very pretty up here as well. But the mountains, the foliage, and this reflection for me are the main story in this image. So I might choose to, if I was standing here again, I might shift the image down just a little bit and make a little less sky and even a little bit more of the foreground, the land portion of the image. But I really love this as is, and I especially love the mix of the fall foliage and the blue sky. It makes me ready to get out into the autumn colors this year as well. It's a beautiful shot. And I would just also mention that the, in general, the exposure looks great, and focus throughout the image looks great as well. This is a beautiful coastline image. I am immediately drawn into the golden light that's hitting these shoreline rocks and the golden glow in the water here. The shore creates a nice leading line into the image. I'm definitely drawn first by this golden light over here on the shore. And then as I explore the image, I notice all these birds lined up here on the rock in the foreground, which I also love. I see that this one was captured with a longer focal length, and I imagine that person capturing this was really drawn into these birds and the golden light, just like I am. I would probably lighten up these shadows a little bit to bring out the birds a little bit more, to make them a little bit stronger part of the story, and allow the viewer's eye to come and explore them a little bit sooner. I would also suggest cropping this in a little bit. This little, I can't even tell exactly what this is sticking up here, but this is just a little bit distracting here on the left side of the frame. And if I can get my crop tool here. So I might just come in probably from, whoops, come in from the top. The sky is creating a little bit of added environment, but up here, there's not a lot of added interest. So I would come down to crop in there. Thinking about that, because the the foreground, the water and the shoreline for me is the highlight of this scene. I might, if I was standing here again, I might shift the frame down a little bit, use a little more water to lead into these birds, and cut out just maybe a little bit of the sky to allow the majority of the frame to be the beautiful water and coastline here. But really beautiful job, and a great noticing these birds all lined up here. You can see if you bump up the shadows a little bit, it helps to bring out some of this detail, and it even helps to enhance the golden glow of the shoreline on the left as well. Moving on to this panorama, I loved looking at this one. Amazing lines and the shadows reflecting of this fence in the sand here. I love that the photographer who took this chose to capture this at a longer focal length. If this was captured with a wider focal length, then we would not be nearly as close to this fence line, and using the longer focal length really allows this fence to be up close and such a prominent part of the image. The sky is really dramatic and beautiful and adds some punch and wow factor as well. Quickly, I would say I noticed that these some of the clouds over here on the right are a little bit bright, losing a little bit of detail. So I might just watch the highlights a little bit. One of the things I noticed here is these three dips in the fence that create these points, like almost like a triangle. And so I love the repetitiveness of those lines and shapes. So I might consider cropping in from the right side. Whenever I crop in Lightroom, it kind of brings down the top and the bottom when you go in as well. But you could also try in Photoshop where you don't have any constraint. I might crop in a little bit from the right so the eye isn't going to go out to the right as much, and it just sort of isolates these three kind of triangular shapes here with the line and shadows of the fence. A really great job capturing this and bringing it close to us with the 100mm focal length. And I love that dramatic sky. I love this Chicago night image of the zoo lights. Chicago is just stunning at night, and this really captures the essence of our city at this time of year. As I live outside Chicago, so this brings me right back. I used to live pretty close to this area for quite a number of years. I really love this composition and the way the line here along the pathway and these lit up trees leads the eye from the left side of the frame over to the bridge where the Hancock building reflects in the water, which I think this is now called 360 Chicago, but it will always be the Hancock building to me. So I love the contrast of this night image. The exposure here is pretty well maintained. There's not too many overly bright highlights and only a little bit of pretty dark shadows here. I might bump up the shadows just a little bit in order to help enhance, bring a little more detail, and also just to enhance the really nice line that leads through the image. I do notice up here that there's a little bit of warmth and red just in the sky. So I might try to cool down the white balance or use the tint slider to add a little bit of green just to neutralize that little bit of color in the sky. The Hancock building looks just a little bit tilted, so I might use, I have a transform tool out down here as well, just kind of tilt it just a little bit, I think, just to straighten it out. You can kind of eyeball it, but it gives you an idea. And one other thought I have, which is just kind of subjective, but as I go through here, for me, as I scan through this, the Hancock building, this area is kind of where I would want my eye to kind of stop. So I might consider cropping this in just a little bit more, just to maybe about right here or so in between those buildings, because it might keep my eye in here. If you want to keep it wider, I think it also works really well as it is, but I think my eye stays over here a little bit stronger, where in the wider it starts to veer further to the right. But either way, this is a really fantastic capture of Chicago at night, and Chicago is magical at night. Makes me want to go in and see the zoo lights. So wonderful job on this one. All right. I feel like this bridge is right out of a fairy tale. Love the line of the shore with these all these little shapes and the beautiful trees, such unique branches and shape. As I look at this, I love the perspective looking down, and I feel like the photographer that took this was really intentional with keeping this rock and this tree and leaving some room here at the bottom of the frame. The one thing that I'm uncertain about here is just this one tree over here on the right with its reflection. I feel like this whole area of the bridge feels so serene and peaceful, and this tree over here feels a little bit heavier. So while I really love the wide perspective and this line of the water, I might consider cropping in tighter to really just focus on the bridge and all the pretty shapes of the trees surrounding it. If I did that, it definitely is a compromise because, again, I do enjoy the wider perspective and this left side line of the water. But if the tree is something that you might also consider to be a little bit heavy, you could crop in. And I would, if I did it, I would go above this little tree and rock because I wouldn't want that to be chopped in an awkward way. So I would kind of go just to the top. And again, it's a bit of a compromise and do a tighter crop, but this would isolate the bridge and all this pretty foliage and just kind of take that serene part of the image, taking out the heaviness of that big tree trunk. So that's kind of a hard decision potentially if you like the wider view. But I just really love the line of the bridge and these trees surrounding it. So beautiful shot. And I do love this higher perspective overlooking the water. This wintry mountain scene is truly captivating. The light here is spectacular, the kind of light that we just dream about coming along on a beautiful winter's day in the mountains. This focal length choice of 75 millimeters, I feel like really is a perfect choice for capturing this scene. Using a somewhat longer focal length to zoom in on this mountain peak with the light hitting it does such a great job of really bringing the eye to that light and yet also capturing some of the environment that is still sitting in shadow. And having that shadow surrounding the light really creates that pocket that allows that to shine. Focus looks good and exposure is fantastic. I think the white balance choice here is perfect. It really feels like a cool winter day, and yet the light of the sun feels warm as it hits the tip of that mountain. This is such a beautiful atmosphere, and there's really nothing that I would change here. Really beautiful job. And I don't know where this is, but it looks like a place that I'd want to visit. I love this area of Death Valley National Park. I've never actually been to this park, but I've seen various images of this beautiful landscape and the textures and lines and shapes that is in this area of the park. At least I think, yeah, this is Death Valley, as mentioned on the bottom. So I love this wide composition because it really shows these unique textures and lines leading up to the mountains and this kind of dramatic, beautiful sky. The one thing I notice here is that this very close foreground is a little bit soft focus and blurry, and the aperture here is f4.5. So my suggestion here would just be to close down and get more of the frame in focus so that you have a sharp depth of field from the foreground all the way to the background. Not only would this create more depth, but I think that this foreground is a unique and just a unique and beautiful aspect of this landscape. And I would love to be able to see more detail and be drawn into the sharp foreground. So here I would suggest closing down to maybe f16. And as you do that, if you focused in the foreground and found that your mountains weren't acceptably sharp, one option that you would have is to try to focus stack. So focus in the foreground and then gradually move your focal point back and take maybe 3 images from front to back and focus stack them in Photoshop. Otherwise, this is a really beautiful image with a lot of depth, great layers and interest throughout the image. So beautiful job. This image really draws me in with the beautiful golden light that's hitting these trees. Very quirky. I love the shapes and the way the warmth of these tree trunks. They're all have such beautiful textures. I'm also really drawn to the puffy clouds and the reflection in the water. The horizon leads my eye into the frame, and I explore the shoreline heading over towards the right side. I think I also see a shadow self-portrait potentially of the photographer here, which is fun. For me, the story kind of is all the light in this area of the frame. So I might crop in and take out this tree right here at the edge. And I think that that keeps the eye more in this area of the frame. That is the highlight for me as a viewer. So I might just crop in a little bit from the top and the right and just take out just a tiny bit of that shadow. I like a little bit here as I think it helps to keep the eye in here, but just to take out that tree, and I have to come in just a tiny bit more, that little black dot right there. Exposure looks really good, as does focus throughout the frame. One other suggestion I had here for an alternate composition and perspective is I'm really drawn to these trees that are reaching up into the sky. And I can envision a vertical composition here as well. So I'll just give you a quick prop to show what I'm envisioning. And this isn't necessarily to say that it's better than the original shot, but just as an alternate idea. But to capture that center of the frame with a vertical perspective, isolating these 3 trees that I think are pretty interesting. So just kind of an alternate idea, and I might play around a little bit over here with that, come to the edge there. But I think this area of the frame is really interesting. So would be a way to capture a second composition of this beautiful light and environment. This scene actually reminds me of an area near my dad's house in South Carolina, that last one. This is such a striking scene overall. Incredible atmosphere, amazing sky and light, and vast view. I love the way my eye is drawn in with the golden light and the curve of this landscape that leads to the mountain in the distance, as well as this dramatic sky. Overall, the focus looks good, and exposure is good. I did notice zooming in that this area over here looks a little bit softer than this area of the mountain. So just something to notice when I zoomed in. This looks softer. This looks much sharper to me. As I said, overall exposure is pretty good. There's a little bit of room here in the histogram to raise this exposure a little bit. This area is obviously really bright and golden with the sun, but this mountain is for me a really big highlight of the scene. So I'd love to see a little bit more light on the mountain peak. Raising the exposure a little bit brings some light over here where we did the shadows, just to really help the eye to come over to this mountain peak after exploring the curve of the landscape. I love the way the foreground is here, creating depth before we take the curve over to the right. I might crop this in a little bit. I love the rocks, but if I crop in a bit from the left, I have to click on this again. It helps my eye not to go up exploring that left corner of the frame. And I feel like my eye comes into the frame a little bit more easily and starts to explore the curve and over to this mountain over here. So that might be what I might suggest to make this even a stronger image as well. But overall, it's incredibly dramatic and striking. And I've really just, wow, it's such an amazing landscape. This is such a beautiful and atmospheric image of the iconic tunnel view in Yosemite. The fog and low clouds really create a soft and ethereal scene that works so well in this black and white. Again, the mix of textures really works well for black and white landscapes. So these soft clouds and fog here in the middle of the valley against the textured trees and mountains really works well here. The exposure and focus is great. There's sharp focus throughout the image. I do notice there's a shutter speed of 1/1000 ISO 800. I might suggest lowering the shutter speed and therefore the ISO as well at 24 millimeters. I don't think that a shutter speed of 1/1000 is necessary for avoiding camera shake. Although of course, sometimes we do accidentally just have funny settings like that. It still works beautifully here. The one thing I might do, and I'm just looking at this tall tree, just the tiny tip at the top is cropped off. So I kind of wish I either had the top of the tree or maybe just a slightly bit more of it cropped in, so it felt a little more intentional to crop off the top. It works for me as is, but I might suggest just cropping down just a little bit, just to make that crop at the top of it feel a little bit more intentional at the top. This is really stunning, and I would love to be standing there with all the atmosphere of these beautiful clouds. Really a beautiful black and white, really nice tones throughout the histogram. Just really draws me in. I absolutely love the scale in this image. This is captured at 300 millimeters, and this, if I can zoom in and you can see, this is a human and their dog, it looks like, which I love. And I love that they spotted this scene distant 300 millimeters is zoomed in quite far. If this was captured with a wider focal length, we would not be able to hardly see that this is a man and his dog at all. So this longer focal length is perfect to really show the scale of how little they are in this landscape and how tall this mountain is. So this, I love this for that reason. I don't have a lot of suggestion for change here. I wonder about the ratio here in the I find myself wanting maybe more of a line here, a little bit more of a horizontal leading to them, or maybe more of a vertical as opposed to this ratio. If I can show a crop in vertical and show a vertical crop would show, enhance, I should say, emphasize the height of the mountain and how much taller it is than the people down below. So I might prefer a slightly different ratio, but otherwise I just really love the way this is captured to show this amazing wide landscape and the people and this man and his dog exploring it. These next two were captured by the same photographer at 2 different focal lengths. So there's just a couple examples along in here. And this one is at 100 millimeters. And then the next one is at 24. And I love that a couple people went out and captured the different, wider scene and then a closer up to show a little bit more detail. So this first one, 100 millimeters, capturing the close up of the trees, the textures and the lines. And I love that, we thought to capture the wide view and then also get, focus in on some of the other close-up details. I would raise the exposure a bit in this one as we have some room in the histogram, but I love the close-up of this view. In the wider view, I love the dramatic sky that you've captured above. This one is at 24 millimeters. As I'm looking at this, I'm noticing there's this ridge over here, and I don't know, there's one of those things when you look at an image and you weren't actually there in person, it's hard to know exactly what the scene looked like in front of the photographer capturing it. But I noticed this curved line over here, and I kind of wonder if there was a little bit more continuation of it. So if there was, my suggestion might be to shift the frame or step back to see if could capture that full curve over here on the edge, because I find myself kind of wondering, I wonder if there was a little bit more of a distinct line there. But otherwise, I love the colors and the dramatic sky in this image. And great job capturing both the wider view and a closer up view to tell 2 different stories in the same scene. Such a beautiful atmospheric shot in the mountains. I love when you get moody clouds in the mountains. So this one really draws me in. I love moody clouds. This one, I love the way the line of the water here draws the eye along the shore over to the mountain and the clouds. It's very hazy. Including this tree, feels very intentional, and I like that because it sits here as it's on the edge of the frame. It's very comfortable, but it keeps my eye from wandering out of the frame. This does feel the horizon feels just a little bit tilted. It may just be that's kind of the way the perspective was, but I might just rotate it just a little bit. If I was approaching this scene myself, I might also consider wandering down closer to the water, getting low and using this line towards the mountains from closer into the water. But I also love this higher view overlooking this scene. This is really, this is a wide view as well. Another thing you could do here, one more thing, is there's a little bit room to raise the exposure. So you could bump up the whole exposure or just bump your whites a little bit. And maybe the shadows in this tree is a little bit as well. Beautiful atmospheric mountain scene. I'm loving the dramatic clouds in this and the soft ripples of the water. This is, let's see, 1/60 of a second. This feels really, I love this texture mixed with the dramatic clouds. This one feels a little bit tilted to me, so I would suggest using the transform to just rotate it a little bit and constrain the crop. Just that feels a little bit straighter. So as I look at this one, I'm drawn in by the waves. I feel like my eye is drawn to this area over here toward the left side of the frame. The little kind of hillside and little peak over here are drawing my eye, as well as these patches of clouds. And then my eye kind of wanders off here toward the right. So I think if I was trying to approach this again, I might see if I could move this area that feels like the strongest focal point to me a little bit more toward the right side of the frame, so that my eye could be led from left to right, or possibly to use a line on the left and a line on the right and center it a little bit more. That way I'm not kind of coming upon this and then just sort of wandering my eye out to the right side of the frame. But there's many things that really draw me in with the dramatic sky and the ripples of the water. It looks like a beautiful place to explore. Here we have another longer focal length capture, and I'm loving the atmosphere that's captured in the low lying fog along the grass and in this little patch between these trees over here. The longer focal length is great to zoom in on this. This is 109 millimeters. Focus and exposure look really good here. I would probably try to just lighten up these shadows just a little bit so that we can see a little bit more detail in these trees. But I love the ethereal mood of the fog coming through. It works so nicely again with the black and white, with the mixture of the soft fog and the textured trees surrounding it. It's really beautiful. If we bring up the shadows just a little bit, then that allows us to just see just a little bit more of the detail here. I like the way you put this tree here on the right side of the frame again. It just anchors the eye and keeps the eye into the frame exploring this area. It's really beautiful. This is such a serene and calm image. It makes me want to just sit on the side of this lake or pond or whatever body of water this is. The soft light and clouds, really soft ripples on the water. It's a beautiful wide scene. And I love the simplicity here. The line of the shore leads my eye in. This single tree to me, supported by the soft light and clouds, feels like the main subject of the frame. These trees over here keep my eye in. I might actually even consider cropping this in to make the scene even more simplistic. So just as an option, I do like the wider frame, but I might consider cropping in here, making it even more minimal and focus on this tree here in the center. I really like the centered horizon here, as it creates a sense of balance. And that really is, works with the calm, soft tones and serene feel of the water here. So I would maybe bump my shadows just a little, and helps to bring a little bit more glow to this tree. But this is really, really beautiful. I absolutely love the light and the simple beauty, minimalism that you captured in this shot. Another really serene and beautiful atmosphere. This one just draws me in with all that mist and the incredible soft and golden glow in the sky above. This is really captivating, and it feels like a wider shot, and it was really fun to see that this is captured with a longer focal length at 160 millimeters. Great focus and exposure. I really love this. I love the way the green and the red of the boats complement each other. At first I was thinking I'd love to see a little bit more room on the side of the frame between the end of this boat and the edge. But then as I was looking at it more, I noticed this little buoy here, and I suspect that there's some other boats or dock over here. So I'm not quite sure that that would be possible. But I am in love with the atmosphere here. And I know this one was already captured at 160 millimeters, but I also could envision this as a beautiful shot with an even longer focal length where just the two boats were isolated amongst the mist. And I can show, this may or may not be possible, but with a longer focal length, but at some point, but just even isolating just the boats, I think would be really stunning. So not as a better shot than the original wider version, but just as an additional idea. It must have been amazing to come upon this amazing light and mist coming off the water. It's really stunning. Here we have another longer focal length, and I love this image. I love the way this tree is standing at the top of the frame, framed between the rocks on either side. Really beautiful. This foreground rocks creates a lot of depth, and the diagonal leads the eye into the frame. Overall, focus and depth of field is good at f16. This very, very close foreground is a little softer, which doesn't bother me. If you wanted to have it sharper, you could focus right here in the foreground and take that focus stacking approach, focus really close in the foreground, and then move back and take, maybe 3 frames or 2 or 3 frames and focus stack them. But again, overall, the depth of field looks good, and I love the way this tree is a clear main subject of the image framed between these rocks. In post-processing, I would raise the exposure a little bit. You have room over here in your histogram, and I would really bring out the colors of the rocks and enhance the contrast between the cool blue sky and then the warm rocks. But beautiful telephoto shot. I love this. I love how this image entitled Rainy Day shows that we can find beauty even on those cloudier days. This has a number of layers that creates a nice depth from the rocks, water, trees, and distant sky in the background. So I'm impressed that it feels there's a good depth of field even with a more open aperture here. The rocks definitely create depth. Being here close in the foreground, I might make this line of rocks a little bit thinner, just so it doesn't feel quite as much like a wall barrier leading into the frame. So I might just bring it up just a little bit, just to allow the eye to head into the more distant layers a little bit more fluidly. And the other thing that I see here is that it feels like there's a lot of green in the image, so I would probably use my tint slider, just slide it a little bit towards magenta just to neutralize the green a little bit until it looks good to you. But just, I would do that a little bit because it feels a little bit green. So if you just can flip back and forth, I think that would help to strengthen the overall mood in this image. But really great job finding the beauty even on our rainy days. This looks like a beautiful view from this place as well. This is a beautiful waterfall capture in long exposure. It was fun to see after discussing long exposures, especially during the second week webinar. This is 6 seconds, a wide view. It's an interesting waterfall, the way this big tree trunk is leaning diagonally. And I find it interesting the way it kind of parallels the line of the waterfall. Really nice depth of field. I love the way the water line really comes right down to the viewer. One thing I might try to do if I was shooting in this location, I might try next time just to shift my frame just beyond this rock here, as I feel like it's a little bit of a barrier in the low right corner of the frame. And so I might just try, if possible. And sometimes it seems possible to someone when they're not there, so maybe it is a little bit tricky, but just to try to get in front of this big rock. Overall, exposure looks good and focus looks good throughout the frame as well. There's just a couple little areas over here that I noticed where the foliage seems to be moving, which actually is pretty impressive for 6 seconds. That's all the area that looked a little bit blurry. This would be probably a pretty easy location to take a fast shutter speed and combine that with a longer exposure. There's not a lot of overlap between the foliage and the water. So it would be, if we're shooting this again, to take a faster shutter along with the longer exposure, and then you could just paint, mask in, and Photoshop the long exposure over the faster shutter speed or vice versa. But this looks really, really great overall. Beautiful job, nice waterfall image. So here's one more example of a wider scene and a longer, more detailed image. So this was a buoy shot here on the beach, and then the closer up shot. So it's fun to see another example of these in the images submitted. This closer up one, 185 millimeters, and then the wider shot at, looks like 60. So it's fun to see. This wider shot gives like a little bit of a story of this buoy maybe washed up on the shore. I like the lower left placement. Feels like it kind of washed up and is abandoned over here on the shore, and shows the environment that laying in, and then the longer focal length really showing details and kind of the story to imagination. In both of these, there's a little, I would raise the shadows to bring up a little bit more detail, but excellent job capturing the wider scene and then a little bit more detailed story. Looks like we're about at our 50-minute mark, so I'll just go through this one last image here. This one draws me right into the length of the coastline. The rocks in the foreground definitely create depth, and the vertical orientation makes this really, gives a long scan path for the eye to explore. While these rocks here definitely create depth by being right in the foreground, and there's really nice depth of field here, I wonder if these rocks are maybe a little bit too much, maybe more of the focus of the image than maybe is the story. For me, the coastline out here, I think is more of a highlight than just the rocks in the foreground. So I might suggest moving up a little bit, having fewer rocks, or perhaps moving down closer to the shore if you were able to, and leading the eye up here using some of this rock closer to the coastline as your foreground. Alternatively, I see these rocks here, and then I see them up here. So I wonder if there's a bit of a curved line of the rocks heading out to this peninsula. So that would be another option, to try to use the curve of the line to lead the eye from the lower left up and around out here to the peninsula. And maybe that would be more of a horizontal shot, but those are some of my thoughts on how maybe to strengthen the composition and to tell the story of this coastline. Up here as well, I noticed that the horizon's just a little bit tilted. So I would just take the ruler tool and just kind of take it across and straighten that out. So that would be a couple suggestions for this location on what I might do to capture it with a stronger story. You guys all captured some really beautiful images, and I wish that we could get to so many more of them. So I really appreciate you guys coming out the last few weeks and coming out tonight and looking at everyone's images and listening to some of my thoughts. I hope that you felt inspired over the last 4 weeks and continue to be as you go out with your cameras. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, a lot of these questions are being answered by other attendees, but someone's asking if you can scroll down to get a glimpse of the remaining images.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't have all of them in here, but those are some of the ones that I was still hoping to get to, but didn't quite happen.
Yeah, and I know everybody who's
There were more of them, but
we had an overwhelming amount of submissions over this last 4 week course too, and yeah, maybe we're gonna have to have more Kristen events.
They were amazing images. I wish I started, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get to all of them, and was like, I don't think I'm gonna get to all 80. It was so many.
Yeah, so this was one of our first critique classes here at the Sigma 4-part deal. So we will have to do another one here coming up again. And sorry if we didn't get to everyone's images or if you didn't see yours in this selection. We're doing our best with this one, but we're really pleased with everyone that came out, and really beautiful images that you critiqued, Kristen. I loved all the feedback you gave. It was almost like learning and kind of getting inside your head and how you look at something and dissect it and how you can make it even better and see the good parts of it. It was really interesting. And overall, everyone's just saying amazing shot and giving everybody the love to each other and the positive feedback on all the images. And so, yeah, we will be taking your comments too and adding future classes on the Samys School. And again, you'll be getting a promotion for Sigma after this. Everything's with a 4-year warranty, and please support Sigma and Samy's camera. And thank you everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you everyone. And y'all have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.